So we're going to start SARTopo, CalTopo Part 3 now. And the primary focus of this talk is going to be managing large incidents and how do you manage all the data that comes in, especially now with the mobile app where you have so much extra data compared to the old Garmin days. How do you manage all that efficiently and how do you organize it? So that'll be the primary focus. But I'm actually going to start out just because of the flow of the class normally with a little discussion about efficiently deploying teams in the field and tracking teams in the field, just for people that may not be familiar with all the tools that are available. I'm going to show a little bit about working with tracks and track cleanup. I'm going to do just a little demo because some people aren't very familiar with that, and I think it's a great skill to have. And it's also something that can be done remotely really easily if you spend the time to learn how to do it well. And every search needs some good track cleanup work, regardless, and even more so today with the mobile app because there's just so many more tracks on any given map. And then I'm going to go into basically a demo. I'm going to talk about how to use all the map settings to efficiently kind of tell the story of a search and keep all of that massive amount of data, in a controlled space there, and then packaging up finally your final search results. So I'm going to go backwards now to what we call the crush, which is how do we efficiently deploy a large number of searchers in a short period of time? We've all been to searches where there's one person in charge and there's 50 or 100 mutual aid people there, and everyone's standing around for an hour or sometimes 2 hours waiting to get deployed in the field. And that's a big mess, big miss. Matt has spoken about losing searcher hours, and one of the quickest ways to lose effective searcher hours is by having people standing around. And volunteer search and rescue runs on good feelings, and if people don't feel like their time's being utilized well, maybe they don't come back the next day and they blow off the rest of the search. So I think it's really important to think about how you want to deploy teams in the field and how to do it efficiently. And it all kind of mimics the ICS world and the span of control discussion. We've kind of, through trial and error and numerous mistakes, come up with some best practices in that area. So I'm going to run through those kind of quickly. This is the Paradise Fire, by the way, campfire, where, on certain days, I think we were up to almost 800 to 900 people. Isn't that right, Matt? So, I mean, on the last days, in the early days, two, three, 400. I mean, these were huge searches. So we learned a lot of lessons on that search when we were deploying teams and how to do it better. So with that, here's our strategy. Start with sign-in sheets, agency sign-in sheets, and T cards with typing. And it's really important to get that typing right. And you have to kind of rely on the agency rep from each county to honestly type their personnel and to, in best cases, form their own small teams with T cards. So if I'm running the search, I'm operations or something like that, operations section chief, I'll probably tell those agency reps that I want 3-person or 4-person ground teams. I want them split into type ones and twos for this search or something like that. And bring your stacks of T cards up to me when you're ready, basically. And that's another reason why we kind of emphasize in the IAP that on that Form 203, I think it is, that you have basically your org chart of who's doing what, but you also have a list of agency reps in there. And that list of agency reps is really important because it gives me, the ops section chief, the insight to go find the right person on each team so they can build these teams for me. So ideally, as these guys roll into the command post, they start signing in, we intercept them and say, hey, can you break your teams into these sizes with these capabilities and so forth. And then plant section chief is running the general briefing, but ops and search manager and the IC and others will be there as well. But there are plenty of other overhead people at a materially large search. So all the other people that aren't speaking at that moment in the general briefing should all be behind the scenes putting these packages together of broken out T cards against assignments, against the highest priority assignments. So the ideal would be in the end, you end up with one briefer to 4 to 5 teams for span of control. And then the ops chief will supervise that deployment. So if I'm ops chief, as soon as I'm done with my little part of the operations briefing, I'm going to run back in behind the scenes. I'm going to meet up with the 4 or 5 people that are working back there to put the teams matching up to the assignments. And then I'm going to say, okay, as soon as this briefing is done, this all looks good. We're going to kind of check whether the team compositions look good and everything. And then as soon as everything ends, we're going to run out and have, instead of one person or 2 people, we might have 4 or 5 or 6 people going out and briefing the teams, and they'll have their own set of assignments to brief people on. So in theory, if you do that right, you can get everyone out of the command post in 20 minutes or 30 minutes from the end of the briefing. And we've been really successful, I think, the last couple of years as we've kind of fine-tuned this. And if you're working with people you're used to working with, it goes even faster. So, that 2 hours or hour and a half or 1 hour kind of can shorten up to 15 or 20 minutes if you're really dialed in. So that's a really good thing. We hand out our 104 or our, copies to the team leader, to ops, plans, and comms. One big exception is if this thing is scaled up to where we're using divisions and groups, which is definitely the case in the all but the first day of the campfire. So, if you have 125 plus and geographic areas or functional areas, then it probably makes sense to start thinking about breaking the problem down, because it's really difficult, as Matt and I learned the hard way. It's really difficult to write team level plans for 300 people and then have 500 people show up, and then it's a disaster. It's far easier to say we have general concepts for each one of these geographical areas, and we're going to have a division supervisor in each one, and we're going to communicate our vision for that search today to that division supervisor, and that person is going to be responsible for breaking his division or her division into smaller teams and so forth. So that's what we did in the latter days of the campfire and many other large searches, and it works really well. But the trick is, if you're going to do that, let's say your general briefing's at 8 o'clock, we would ask that all those division supervisors be identified ahead of time, and they may be the agency reps for each county or something like that, or we may choose from those guys. And you're ideally looking for search manager level people or really strong operations type people. And you're going to say, I want all of you to be at the ICP at 7 a.m. before your team. And we're going to have an earlier briefing. And we're going to go through your team, your division's assignments. Maybe there's 6 or 8 divisions. And we're going to say, here's the concept for each one of you. And I'm going to basically do the whole briefing for you at that time. Then we're going to do the general briefing at 8 o'clock with the 300 people out there. And they're all going to get briefed up. And as soon as that general briefing ends, immediately all of the division supervisors will stand up and say, I want Marin, San Mateo, Contra Costa, and Santa Clara over in this corner of the parking lot. I want, Napa, Mendocino, and so forth in this corner of the parking lot. And you can quickly get those divisions organized and people out on the road. So does that mean everything runs smoothly if you follow these rules? And the answer is no, because there are actually several more things you have to kind of carefully do well. And one of them is building teams in an intelligent manner. So you really want to match the skills to the assignments. We've derailed many searches with incidents, not many, but several searches with IWI type situations where we've put teams in over their head, and that's really difficult. So we want to really make sure that when we identify type 1 teams, they're truly type 1, and it might be worth talking to the agency rep to make sure you're confident those are strong type 1 teams. And you're going to obviously get those into the hardest assignments. Another thing we kind of failed to do sometimes is get experienced flankers with our canine handlers. And that's kind of a fail too, because there are plenty of people that really enjoy working with canine teams and they're pretty talented at it. So to the extent you might be able to identify some of those people and kind of hold them aside, that's a good thing too, because the CARTA folks really appreciate having strong flankers, and strong flankers really appreciate working with canine teams. So that's a win-win situation. Next thing is you want to have really good, strong team leaders, experience, local knowledge, navigation skills. One of the things we'll do in mutual aid searches quite often is we'll try to figure out the 5 or 8 or 10 people that are local to the area that really have the local knowledge, and they know the geographical terminology and the slang that's used around there and that kind of stuff. And you want to make sure you intersperse those people to the extent you can in foreigner teams, and that they are in there and they can provide that local knowledge on teams. Another thing that we try to do is the farther away you are from safety, like a helicopter deployment or way down a drainage on foot, the more important it is to really have strong medical skills on those teams. So I'm really careful, and I know Matt's really careful too, is like when you put people in danger or far away, I really want to know, like, do you have working medics, not paper medics? Do you have people, make sure you try to get the strongest medical people out there you can in those most hazardous situations. And then county teams versus rainbow teams. One of the things when I started out running searches, we were always taught it's really great to get a mix of teams together, build camaraderie between counties and things. It turns out that kind of can work okay when you're in a small controlled search environment, but it goes out the window pretty quickly. And I'll give you one example from the campfire yet again. On the first day, Matt and I broke up various counties. So we'd have teams of mixed counties to make the team numbers come out right. And we didn't really group by counties. We just started splitting people up. And about 10 minutes after everyone got sent out and deployed, people started coming back to the command post and they go like, "Hey, do you have a vehicle for us? Because all the trucks are gone." I'm like, "Well, just use your county truck." Well, the other teams that got briefed first took all of our vehicles. So that can really get screwed up, right? So if you actually build your teams using county by county type teams, then you can tell the leaders of that county, okay, you guys have all your own vehicles, you figure out how to split them up. And if you run out, come back to us and we'll figure out using our UTV or what other transport things, vans or whatever, we'll figure out how to get the extra people out. But primarily, we're hoping you all got here in your own vehicles. Hopefully, you can go out and do your search in your own vehicles. So that's a much cleaner way to do it. And then we also carefully evaluate team sizes. And this is something that's changed a lot with the advent of the mobile app, I think, because for me, having more chess pieces on the map is better. And having like smaller assignments generally than we used to draw with smaller teams is kind of a good thing, because what you can do is because we have good communications now and we have good remote mapping and we have real-time data coming in and good situational awareness, all of a sudden it makes it much easier to redeploy teams based on what sort of clues are coming in and what you're learning about the search or the missing person. And we might have had 4 to 6 person teams on big assignments, 5 years ago, but now, 3 and 4 person teams on smaller assignments. And I might put you in 3 or 4 different segments over the course of a day. But it gives, it makes for a much more efficient search if you can kind of keep your teams a little bit smaller. Don't go crazy on it, but, a little bit smaller. I think we spoke about this during SARTopo too, but within CalTopo, provided you go in and say how many members you want on each segment assignment, you can print the 104 deployment summary in bulk operations, and it will tell you essentially how many resources you need of each flavor, provided each team was only going to do one segment for the day, right? So in this case, you can see, 4 people, 8 people, 46 people, type ones, 31 and 45. Okay, so if everyone did one assignment, then I would need that number of people. But if I'm going to make a rule of thumb that people can do probably 2 of these assignments in one day, then I'm going to probably ask for make sure I have at least half of this many people coming to the search. And then I'm going to have a good chance of accomplishing what I'm trying to do for that day. Hope that kind of makes sense there. So it's a great tool. And if we have the time when we're building the assignments, I try to use that as part of our decision making when we go for our resource order. Any questions on any of that so far? I know it's a lot of stuff on but it works, right, Matt? I mean, I think you know, splitting up the deployment and having that all working behind the scenes during the briefing is really important. And then it just gets, as soon as that briefing's over, people are going out in the field and it's a big win, way more searcher hours, happier searchers, and everything else.
Yeah, I think it's very common now. We can see a large search with, up to 100 people and everyone gets out of there in under an hour, including the briefing time.
Right. And just for historical purposes, here's the campfire actually with our divisions. And it's a little hard to see here, but each one of those sticky notes is a county. So we had, dozens of counties there that day. And then each division supervisor had paperwork on the upper table. And then here's the counties that division supervisor got for that day. And so from days 2 or 3 on, that's kind of how we ran that incident. And we would also incorporate, the National Guard and other teams that were involved here as well. But, this was a really good system. Once we figured out it didn't make sense to write team level assignments for hundreds of people. Scaling of divisions makes a lot of sense in certain cases. All right, changing courses here again. This may be common knowledge to BAMRU folks, but I like to just highlight it anyway. But real-time tracking in the field is pretty outstanding now. The situational awareness is dramatically better than 5 or 7 years ago in this business. So I like to highlight the types of devices that you can put on CalTopo pretty easily. We have the Nanos from National Guard, and for those who haven't ordered them before, National Guard is highly responsive. They call them Shout Nanos, and they have another name for the new version of it. But essentially, they're in-reach units that are militarized, and they are available with a phone call through Cal OES. And they will come out, and those can be loaded straight into the CalTopo map, and you can see them in real time. Obviously, in-reach devices can be added from an enterprise account or from a premium solo account. And Matt has made some changes to CalTopo now where you can kind of register those as live devices in your account through the administration panel, and they'll just always be available anytime you turn on the show location button on a map layer. So that's a pretty handy tool too. Several counties, especially in the Sierras, I think Nevada, who is it, Matt, that's got them? Nevada, Sierra, Placer.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think
not
three or
sure.
four counties, and Marin County has them as well, our county. So if you have the Fleet Sync VHF radios with the GPS mics on them, and you basically connect it through a radio to through a wire to a device running CalTopo locally, you can track all of your radios in the field, which is super important if you're in a remote area without cell coverage, and that's your typical search environment. So people like Nevada and Placer are all just set up, and their radios all talk to one another in each other's counties. So they kind of have this mini network up there, repeater network, and it works really well. And so when they run a search, they just have one machine sitting in the corner that's tracking all the radios out in the field. So that's a great tool. Finally, this is a typo. It should be called the CalTopo mobile app, but that works great. You can track everything there. And the other thing you can track, obviously, are all airplanes that are in the sky and helicopters. If you're running a rescue operation, you can see the rescue helicopter come in, which is very handy situational awareness wise. And if you have a county helicopter that you use regularly, once again, you can register that aircraft in your team account, and then you can turn it on whenever you want and kind of just see it on the map. You don't have to have everyone, whoa, what happened there? You don't have to have everyone trained up to do that with any special skill sets. Any questions on real-time tracking? Don't think so. All right, so let's get into managing large data sets. So this is a search Matt and I both managed many years ago up in the Sierras, and it was a very challenging search with no outcome, sadly. Still bugs us to this day. In fact, Matt and his son were up kind of following up last year on it once again, because it's one that's always bothered us. But what was interesting about this search was it was one of those searches as well where we started to think about standardization. Each county would do things kind of their own way, and some still do to some extent. But one of the reasons we developed our approach to MLPI, as well as the advanced direction and control class that we teach for the state. And it's kind of spilled over into the standard direction and control class too. But the idea is that it'd be a lot better if everyone kind of spoke the same language out there, county by county. And when you go in to do a management changeover on a mutual aid search, and you look at a map and you look at all the documentation, you can kind of understand what happened. And I think, 10 years ago, that was definitely not the case. And everybody did things differently. They used different software. CalTopo wasn't even a standard back then. Some people stuck with Terrain Navigator Pro for quite a while. In fact, the search I'm going to use as a demo started out on Terrain Navigator Pro before we switched it over to CalTopo. So, what does that mean? I think it's great if we could all get to kind of a standardized language. It doesn't mean you have to do everything exactly like we say, but we think it's important to kind of do it roughly like this, best you can. And then you're going to have the best chance of handing over a search management team to the next one with some continuity and with a minimum amount of confusion. So let's talk about how we do that. Starting with, should we do the track cleaning matter? Do you think we should skip that, give with this crew, or what do you think?
I think we should cover it, especially since
Okay, let's
we're
do
starting
it.
this.
So one of the things we see here quite often is a map like the top portion, and this has kind of been sanitized and cleaned up a little bit, but you always get bad data on a map. And when you're in the overhead team and you're looking at the map, you get a lot of confusion and distraction from bad data. What you really want is all the pertinent data from that search, which is pretty much what we ended up with on this lower map here. So what I like to do is spend a little bit of time talking about how we get from point one to two here. And I'm going to switch over quickly to another browser. Just 1 second here. And there it is. And I have to hit the switch button, stand by, share, Google Chrome. There we go. All right, can everyone see that okay? Matt, thank you. Okay, so here's that slide I just showed you. And this is just a little subset of tracks from that search, and then I kind of color coded them and all to make them seem more prominent here. But one of the most obvious things we'll see at times is someone will turn on their CalTopo app at the CP, and maybe they'll kill it and then turn it back on when they start their assignment with the same track going. Or in the old Garmin days, people would do the same thing. They would turn it off, turn it back on, and you'd have the same track running. And the end result of that is always going to be a straight line. Sometimes it might be from Yosemite where you went last weekend or something like that. And you don't want all that clutter on the map. So what I'm going to do first is turn all these off. And then I'm going to turn on just this black line that has some clutter. And you can kind of see here over on the upper right that that's really the search area for this particular team here. And all of this stuff is distraction that we don't need on the map. So how do we get rid of it? Well, we can kind of zoom in at this and we can look at it and we can click edit and we can see what's going on here. If I zoom out, you can see someone truncated this already because there was bad data going down to the southwest. And you can see this thing was recording a couple of data points in the ICP, and then they turned it on when they got out of their car at their search assignment, let's say. So what we really want to do is get rid of all this junk that is in between here, right? And so there's a couple ways you can do this. If there's just a couple of single dots, I can go in here and left click on this particular dot, right click on it and hit the delete vertex button and it'll delete that one dot. Sometimes there might be, several dots in that one location. You can kind of see them here. I'm going to do the same thing here, delete vertex and delete vertex. So now if I did that right, and I should say, I always like to export these tracks first using the export button up here. Export, check everything and export it. And then if I screw something up and delete a track accidentally, then I can go back in and re-import that particular track automatically and try a second time. So now I've done that, and now I have exactly what I wanted, which is a nice clean track in this search area. So just deleting those extra spurious points a lot of times can fix that. And I'll give you another example of that here. Let me turn this on. And this happens up in Granite a lot too. Sometimes you just get spurious GPS responses, and I'm assuming it's echoing or bouncing or something like that. And in this case is a great example where you just get one point. If I click edit again, you'll probably see there's just one point up here off of this road. And I can go up here and do the same thing because I know that's they didn't go straight line up there and straight line back. If I delete that vertex and save it again, then I've cleaned that one up. I've still got all the stuff on the road. Some counties, like Nevada, like to keep all of the road tracks, and they like to keep road tracks going all the way back to their searchers' homes. That's kind of their policy, which is great. Other times, other counties will like to clean up the tracks, including the stuff on the main roads, just to kind of make the map look a little cleaner and really just focused on the search areas. So it's kind of up to the policy. And what I'll do is follow the lead of the county and how they want to keep their record of the search. So let's go in here and find a couple more. Let's do this red one and say we want to get rid of all the road tracks. So what I'm going to do is kind of turn off all the other ones just for fun here. And let's see here. There we go. And okay, it's this one. Okay, so that's the one of interest. And really what I want to do is get rid of all these driving back and forth to the command post because the search area is way over here. So if I start zooming in, eventually I'm going to get to where what makes sense. I imagine they parked right here because you can see it looks like they got out of their cars and started their search. And I can see one of these paths was them coming in, and one of them is them returning to the command post. And you can actually in CalTopo follow the route of what they that they went on as well. But in this case, all I want to do is delete all of this stuff above. So I can go in here and I can right click again and hit, oh, sorry, this has changed recently. It's going to be a left click and I can hit transform. And this is a new menu, split. See this over on the left-hand menu. I'm going to hit split here and hit OK. And then I'm going to go to the other leg of that they were driving on and hit transform split here. Now, if I go in with my mouse cursor and wiggle it over that, it'll light up whatever I'm hovering on. And you can see the search area tracks over here are not lighting up when these light up. So I've probably done this correctly. However, because sometimes you don't, and sometimes there's a surprise in there, what I like to do is go in here and edit this new track, which is just got the same name as the original, but it's a subset of the original. And I can edit this and I can change it to a different color like yellow. And then I can do the same on this other leg and edit it, change it to another color like yellow, and then save that. So now if I zoom out, I can make sure I'm really deleting the stuff I don't want, which is driving back and forth from the command post. So that looks great. So now over here on my left-hand column, I can simply delete the yellow track, first one and second yellow track. And then now I'm left with exactly the track I want of my search area. So what's that?
We added a little Easter egg for this recently, which is if you turn the track back on and go to split it again.
Yeah. Oh, the one that's left, you mean?
Yeah, just show the red one
Oh,
again.
hang on, red line.
And just
Okay.
split it somewhere.
Transform split.
Yeah, so I don't know if you noticed it renamed the
Oh, update
segments,
new
but
line's name.
you can change it to color and then
Oh, look at that.
auto recolor the other one of the two halves for you.
Beautiful. So that saves a step. That's awesome. Thank you. Nice improvement. So every time I teach a class, it gets longer and longer because there's new features that we have to explain, which is a good thing. Okay, so that looks great there. Thanks for that. And so now our map is starting to clean up a little bit here. I should do the same thing on this purple one. So I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to assume it has two purple legs again. Although I see two right there. So I'm going to go up here, let's say, and I'm going to go transform, split, and I'm going to change the color. That is so cool. Nicely done. And then I'm going to try to snag this other leg, which I think is right here, and do the purple one, transform split. And that's weird. It split the other way, but I think that's okay, right?
Doesn't know which side you want it to be, which color.
Gotcha. So it's just a different color, which is great. I'm going to delete the purple one here. And anytime I make a mistake, I can just re-import those tracks, and it will filter the ones that are already on the map from the ones that have been accidentally deleted. So there we go, and perfect outcome again. So now I'm cleaning this all up, and I just keep going like that. So in the olden days, this was all done at the command post, right? You would have a plans person, second or third plans person in the corner, cleaning up tracks all day. It's pretty tedious at times, especially if you're not very good at it. Once you get the hang of it, it's pretty easy and you can get really quick at cleaning up. But it's the perfect task for someone at home. Like here, I have a 30-inch monitor. It's all quiet. I have great internet connection, and I can just sit here and clean up tracks for a search. I don't have to have any special knowledge of what's going on at the search or real-time intelligence. I can just clean up all the data from today's search as it starts to come in, and the tracks end up in lines and polygons. So a lot of times if I'm not at a search, I'll volunteer to do that. I'll take the tracks, I'll color code them all for the right operational period. I'll put them in a folder and then I'll clean them up. And then by the end of the day, if Matt's at the search, he's reviewing the results of the day. He's not looking at a bunch of noise on his screen. He's seeing some nice clean tracks out there. So that's pretty much the goal of this process. There are some twists. The new twist is when you use the mobile app, which we all do now, you have what are called app tracks while it's live and recording. Once that person comes back in good cell range and says, I'm done and I save my track, hopefully that track will finalize and it'll automatically go over into the lines and polygons folder as a finished track. And that's where I usually take the tracks that I'm going to clean up and all. Sometimes people will leave a search without, you know, getting that registration done to the server. And if they do that, it'll stay on live and it might pop up again when they get down off the mountain and keep recording. In those cases, I'll typically move them into that day's operational period tracks, but it might be a day or two before I can finally clean that person up when that track finalizes itself. I think it's 72 hours, Matt, is that right? Before it will automatically
Yeah.
kill itself and turn it into a line and polygon type style track. So anyway, that's that process. It's great to have a few people on your team knowledgeable about how to do this. I try to teach this inside our team pretty regularly, and we have lots and lots of people that we can call on to help out with that. So with that, I'm going to move back to, actually, it didn't move back. Stand by. There it goes. Back on the PowerPoint, okay? Okay, good. All right, so let's talk about organizing data now. So one of the things, and we have a paper that should have been handed out, but we have a PDF. If anyone's watching online, you can write either Matt or myself, and we can send you a copy of our best practices document. But it talks a lot about how to identify assignments, how to label them, how to group things, which symbols to use, how to use folders effectively and all. And it's kind of the process that I'm going to talk about now, but it's a little bit more detailed in the document. So here's this search in the Sierras that we were talking about a minute ago. And you can see over here, this is the actual sets of folders that we came into. And there are a few things that were difficult here. You can see OP4 assignments. Those were actually written in Terrain Navigator Pro, so that made things a little bit complicated. Every marker that was made on the search, whether it was the command post, a red hot clue, or this is where I parked my car to go searching, were all jumbled together with red dots and things like that. So that was kind of confusing. It doesn't give you a good visual picture on the map. Um, Lines and polygons, essentially day 3 or 4 of the search, and all of the search tracks were in one folder with randomized colors. So it makes it really hard to understand what the progression of the search was day by day. So that's something you want to fix. In this case, we had 2 operational periods, OP6 and 8, shown here, and they have the same color, which is very confusing. You'd like to have those different. So there's a lot of stuff here that was not great in terms of if I'm coming up to take over the search and Matt's handing it off to me, he's going to try to show me through the map, what they've done and what the process has been and what the clues are and what we've learned. And it's going to be really confusing because there's a lot of bad tracks. There's a lot of um, poor folder management and stuff like that. So how can we make that better? And you can start by using folders kind of aggressively and use the visibility function. So every folder has two visibility functions that you can turn on and off. One is, do you want it to be turned on by default? So if this was a master map and I'm using it on day 3 of my search, let's say, I don't want searchers to see day 1 and 2 tracks when they open this map up. So I would have tracks dash operational or OP4 tracks and OP6 tracks. I'd probably have those folders turned off by definition when a searcher loads the map. And I would always have the names of those tracks turned off because otherwise your map becomes completely cluttered with track names, which are not really important. You can always click on any track on the map and learn what team made that by just clicking on it. So you don't need to see all the labels all over the map. And then you really want to make sure that you match up track operational period colors with the operational period that colors you chose for the map, and it just makes everything flow a lot better. And so just organizing that initial data works a lot better. Another thing, as you zoom in, folders like markers here. You have game cams, you have footprint clues, a voice clue. ICP is a red dot, so that's hard to pick off a map if you're looking at a map. PLS has a nice marker on there. And then I've got a track dot, I don't know what that is, and so forth and so on. So I can take that data and clean it up. Clues dash important is a folder I almost always use. So where have I gotten clues on this search that are deemed to be important or somewhat worthy? Clues that are minor or unvetted. You see I have game cameras in here. If this was say a dementia search in a urban suburban interface kind of area or even a suburban wild interface, I would probably have a camera folder and I would probably subcategorize those cameras like green, red, and so forth. Here's a camera we looked at and we didn't find them. Here's cameras we need to check. Here are our priority cameras to check, that sort of thing. And then you can get law enforcement out and working on that potentially. And when we have a missing dementia search in our own county, we might have 50, 75 cameras in the first hour now because every team member is trained to tag those cameras. And then someone at command post or at home is just putting all those cameras into folders, and then we can identify the target cameras to go check and so forth. So splitting things up like that is great. We have minor clues. Then we have important markers. So I'll always have a markers dash important folder. And in this case, the two things you always want to show are where's the command post, maybe where's staging, and where's the PLS? Where did the person go missing from as far as we know? So breaking that up is a huge start just to get away from, the kind of randomness of the left-hand side. Here's another one, and this is a fairly new, this is from a search we had last summer where we completely hammered, how many operational periods? 7 or 8, I think. And Matt was there much of the time, as was I, and we were sure we covered everywhere this guy could be, and we kept searching and searching. And as we analyzed the tracks to try to find gaps where we had missed things, it was a little bit confusing because, like, which ones were airplane tracks and which ones were canines with a handler and which ones were ground searchers and so forth, and which ones were an e-bike flying by at 5 miles an hour or 10 miles an hour. So it's really important, I think, in those situations in particular, to kind of tag those tracks differently. And we kind of came up with a system. You can use a variation of this or whatever, but the classic solid line for a ground searcher makes sense. A long dash for a canine. So that all of a sudden, now when I look over here, I can see where the dogs are walking around in here and so forth. That's really extra information that's very useful to me. And then short dashes, e-bikes and OHVs where they're blasting through the area kind of faster with a low POD. And then dots for aerial aircraft. And I'll usually move those into their own folder as well. And I'll call it something like tracks-air-op2, which is different than tracks-op2, where I have all my ground and canine tracks and so forth. because once again, I can use visibility to turn things on and off real easily. So that's a new thing, and I think it's pretty effective. Organize tracks by operational period folders and match the color of the OP. You can still see I have a bunch of garbage tracks on here that didn't get cleaned up fully. Um, and if I were spending more time on it, I would probably clean those up much further. But you can see here now, all my tracks from operational period 6 are laid over the assignments we had out in operational period 6, and I can see them all in blue. And same here, I can see all of operational period 8 in green. And if you're wondering why there's no 7, it's because they used a daytime, nighttime, 12-hour operational period, and there were no night operations during this period here. Okay, moving right along. Matt wants me to get rid of the slide. I probably will soon, but we still have canine handlers and a few people that use Garmin tracks. And to the extent you aren't labeling your tracks like we recommend on CalTopo, which is your team number 101 followed by your two initials, RS in my case, that would be my track number. A lot of times, if we're importing from a Garmin or Carta K9 GPS or something, it will say current track or a bunch of stuff like this. So whoever is the gatekeeper there should really try to clean those up on import and give them some sort of identifier that lets us know what their team is. So to the extent, and it's still pretty rare, when people are using physical GPSs still, bring them in, have a yellow sticky note, and don't let them walk away until you write the team number down and put the sticker on the GPS. And then you can have a nice, efficient workflow where you don't get confused about who did what. And then afterwards, they can find their own GPSs over on the other table. So it's kind of a legacy thing, but it still does happen at times. Another thing, and I've talked about this before, whenever you're printing maps for, say, the IAP or for a general briefing, if you're doing a big monitor presentation in the morning, always use random colors. So show your assignments by random, and that's at the bottom of the assignments folder. Very handy setting. If you leave everything in the operational period color, you can kind of see it's hard to tell where one assignment ends sometimes and where the next one begins. But if you randomize those colors, you're going to get a pretty good, feel for how that's laid out. Other best practices, create a folder of identified LZs. Matt is doing that tonight, I believe, LZ presentation. One of the things we like to do is whether or not we have helicopter assets working at the beginning of a search, start thinking about it. Have someone think about it and go through the exercise of identifying LZs. Because what if someone breaks a leg, 10 miles from the command post? You're going to need an LZ. So think about it and put those in a folder and identify probable LZs. And Matt's going to talk about that a lot. Consider division or group folders as needed as well. You can also break, like water group is doing sonar searches in the water. You can put their tracks in a different folder and so forth. That would be water group alpha or something like that. Consider prior assignment folders as the search progresses. A lot of times there's just old stale folders that old stale assignments that we're not going to reuse. And I'll put them in that prior assignments folder, which is turned off by default. And it's just less clutter on the map. And always remember the golden rule, never to use the same letters on two assignments. Start at AA at the beginning of your search and end at ZZ or whatever, but never reuse the letters again because you can end up in a bad situation if you do that. And once again, in our best practices doc, it talks about using standardized icons for like command post, base, camps, helispots, helibases. Matt will talk about that a little bit more too. Important markers at the bottom. This is one I always use, this red X for PLS or a find location or the LKP and so forth. That pops out, jumps off a map kind of, and it makes it easy to orient yourself when you open a map up. So another thing, which I think I've talked about before, is that once you've chosen the best map layer for your searchers as a planner, you want to go in here and make sure that you check the box. And there's actually two boxes on the menu now, but one of the boxes will say, set the layers, map layers to the current default. And so what'll happen is whatever maps you've chosen as being the best maps for starting that search out will be locked in for the first time everyone opens that map up. They can change their own view and change the layers that they have, but at least you're giving them a good chance of success because you, as the planner or the ops person, have spent a lot of time looking at this map, and you have a good idea of which of the dozens of map layers that might be usable in this area are the best. So that's just a great way to make sure people start out with a good quality map layer. Another thing I like to do, and I'm going to jump over at the end and give you a demo of all these concepts as well. And here's kind of how it looks. If someone opens it up and uses OpenStreetMap and they have their assignments on the left, they're going to have no idea really what's going on, and they're going to have a bad, situational awareness of their assignment. Whereas on the right, there's a bunch of trails that don't show up all that well on the left here, and you get a much better feel for what's going on there in the area. So setting that default layer is really good. And then I've already talked about setting which objects appear for mobile users. I like to turn those off and all. And you know what? I'm going to go, before we get into the next slide, I'm going to jump over and kind of demo all these concepts that we just talked about here. So let me switch my share to my CalTopo map. There we go. And here's that search that I actually use for these slides. And the first thing you can see is there's a bazillion stamps on here with track names and things, which is not great. And here's our assignments with a different convention for labeling assignments than we would use. They're not A, B, A, C, and so forth. And so there's a lot of confusion here. Down here on the markers column is kind of what I showed in the presentation, but everything's jumbled into one thing. And then all of our lines and polygons, every single track from 4, 5, 6 days of the search is dumped in one folder here. And we were all guilty of this. I'm not pointing at anyone else because we were actively running the search at the time it looked like this. So it's on us. And then here's a bunch of assignments, which is our old way of numbering them. We don't really number them that way anymore. And then a couple of clues down at the bottom. So if I zoom in here and I start saying like, well, if I'm handing this search off to Matt tomorrow and I'm going to try to show him what's been done, it's pretty hard to understand here. And I can't really easily turn things on and off. I can turn these assignments off maybe because, that'll just tell me what tracks have been put up here. But you can kind of see like it's a little hard to tell because um, they're not color coded super well. There's some color coding that went on, but it's not great. And we don't know when some of the tracks are made. And it's kind of, you can't easily see where the CP is. And I can't really turn things on and off easily because they're not grouped in nice, clean folders. So if I go to this after folder here, I've gone through and color coded things and I've turned helicopters into dotted lines and things like that. And then I can actually go in here further and say like, um, you know, if checked, folder objects will be visible. However, the labels are turned off. So now, just right off the bat, you can see I don't have thousands of track names like I did on that first one, right? So it's really hard to see anything here with all of the track names that are showing up on this map and so forth. So over here, it's a lot cleaner story. So I can actually, if I'm handing this off to Matt, what I'm going to do is say, okay, well, this search has been going on for 3 or 4 days now. And I'm not going to really talk about the assignments particularly because at this point, our record of the search are our tracks and our clues. So if I go up here at the top and I say, I'm just going to leave on my important markers. Where's the command post? Where's the PLS? Okay, here's where we are. Here's where the person went missing, right up here. And after all these days of searches, literally, this is the only clue information that's come up. Someone heard a voice up here. They're not 100% sure, but that was early on day 2. There was a canine alert down here near the water, heading to the water. There was another canine alert later down by the water. There was a track on the ground and another print over here. But we also know there are people out there a lot, and it's kind of a heavily traveled trail system. But that's all we've got so far. And to show you kind of how we progress through this, we have operational period. I think X are the ones that we could not identify as when they were done, but I think these were the ones that were done day 1 and day 2, but we really didn't have the information to differentiate them very well. And then we had operational period 2. So you can kind of say we focused initially pretty much close to where the person went missing, and then in some of the trail systems around that particular area. And then as the search progressed, we started adding some more coverage out. Oops, out a little further up these hills and so forth, and further out from and then some high probability areas around these regions here. And then on day 3, we ramped up our people a lot and we did some more area searching around the lake and then up around these high probability peaks and such. And you can see we had a lot of air support out there as well, flying around during the day there. And then yesterday, we kept pushing further out where we had a couple of clues potentially. And this is where we stand today as I'm handing things off to you. And then just for perspective, I'm not a big range ring fan, but just to give you an idea how far we are here, that's the 1 mile limit, and that's a 3 mile limit there. So you can kind of see where we are relative to um, how far she might have traveled in a quick period of time here. So my point being, like, I can tell a story if I organize my data and organize my colors and organize my shapes and my symbols. That's a lot cleaner than trying to tell a story from kind of a jumble of single colors and distractions, let's say. So the more I clean up, and even here you can see the tracks that didn't get cleaned up going back to the command post are pretty distracting here and should probably be cleaned up too. But you can also see some obvious things, like there's some areas that you might want to focus on the next day and so forth up in here, for instance. And you can kind of see the progression of when that was all done. Does that kind of make sense to everybody? Okay, so that's uh, pretty much the pitch on organizing data. But there's one more thing that's, I think, really important, and this kind of something we learned on the job as well. So I should be back here, and that is to create operational period specific search maps. So a couple things going on here. One is we have a mobile app now. The mobile app means every single searcher brings in a lot of data and a lot of search information, which is a burden on uh, cell signals and things like that if you're going to download the map for tomorrow, let's say. So it also brings some operational risk. If I have, if this was a murder, let's say, and we're on day 6 of looking for the victim out there, that's going to be a highly sensitive case, and you're not going to want that information getting out to the public or the media. So one of the things you can do is really lock this down using the security settings in CalTopo. But one of the easiest things to do is to not burden the searchers with all of the historical data that they don't need. So what we will do typically is we'll start with operational period 1 map, and that will become the master map in the command post. And that'll be the top secret command post map that retains all of the data from the search, and then you back it up multiple times and things like that. But each day you'll collect the data, you'll do all the final cleanup work and organization like I just talked about in the prior cases. You'll do all that on that master map, and then the next morning, you're going to only export the assignment segments that you're going to need for that next day or likely to be using that next day. And then you're going to export the important information that you want the incoming searchers to see. That'll typically be where's staging, where's the repeater, where's the drop points for lunch, where's the UTV drop off points, where's the place last seen, and you might or might not leave a couple significant clues on there if they're relevant to the searchers going out. But typically I don't even leave the clues on there. It's just like the hard facts. Where are the gates? What are the codes? What are the lock codes on the gates? Those kinds of things. And then they get a nice clean map. So there's 2 advantages. One is if they show it to the press or the family, they're not going to see all of the information that's been gathered. And, you retain a high degree of confidentiality there. Secondly, when they open that map up on CalTopo and they're up in the mountains with a weak cell signal or a weak Wi-Fi signal, it only has to sync a very tiny amount of data. It doesn't have to sync the millions of tracks that have already been recorded for the search. So it's a much lighter lift on the mobile app and your bandwidth. So that's pretty good. So they're going to get better performance. And one of the things that some people don't realize is that even if you turned off all the folders that had the other tracks and things, if you open that master map up on your phone, it's going to download all of those tracks, even though they're not visible. So there might be towards the end of that search, hundreds of megabytes of data that's going to get dumped into your phone, affecting its performance and all, even though you're not even looking at them. So doing this clean operational period by day search map is absolutely the way to go. So, as I mentioned, it's more secure, reduce the mobile app download, and it's super easy. At the end of the day, I'll probably clean up the map on that daily map, clean up the data on there. Then I'll export it from CalTopo. Then I'll import it to the master map with the appropriate folders, make sure it's all organized. And then we can use that one to do any fine tuning that we want for the next day's assignments, any gaps in coverage that we might have, and so forth. And one of the other things you can do, because there's a new feature in here, in the printing function, you can actually print to an MB tiles file, it's called. And what that'll really do is it'll make a transparent um, map layer of all the tracks that you've laid down to date, if you're doing it from the master map. And then you can make a little map sheet of that, and you can put it on your daily map if you want. And then you can kind of turn on its transparency off and on, and it'll allow you, without much overhead at all on that particular day's map, to see all the track coverage and all as you're fine tuning your plan for that next day. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of optimize that, but it's a really good way to go. And we pretty much do this on every search. If it's maybe a 2 day, sometimes I'll go 2 days on the same map, but after 2 days, I'm definitely going into the routine of operational period specific search maps. And then you archive them all at the end, and then you have the original data from each day plus the cleaned up master data. So there's my map. This is from a real search last summer. Here's our master map data. You can see there's a lot of it. We hammered this area day after day after day, and that's a pretty nicely cleaned up map because basically all the instructors in our various classes were working on the search on most of the days, so they were all trying to outdo each other and keeping the maps nice and clean. And then you can see here is an operational period 7 map where it basically shows you just the assignments that you're going to and the segments you're going to attack for that day, some confirmed clues that we might have had for that particular day, and then important markers that you would need out there as well. So there you go. And here's that print to map sheet feature. I forgot I had a slide on it, but you can actually do that lightweight track overlay using print to MB tiles. So it's pretty nice too. And then finally, you can see how that works in real life. That would be an overlay that zooms in and does a very nice job of letting you see your tracks without loading all those tracks onto a specific map and burdening the data load on that map.
And Rich, just since we're
Yep.
recording this, it's actually print to map sheet. We do have print to MB tiles, which lets you download a file to take
Oh,
with you,
oh,
but
I'm sorry.
map sheet.
Okay. Thank you for the clarification. Print to map sheet is the correct terminology. Sorry about that. Okay, and there you go. That's all good. Other best practices. I already mentioned setting the default layers viewed by searchers and default folders viewed by searchers. Send the update URL barcode, so through the sharing dialog, to your incoming resources. Ideally, if you're following the planning P carefully, as Matt has taught us all, then what you're going to be doing is, late afternoon, early evening, you kind of know there's going to be 9 counties coming into your search tomorrow. And I love to have that finalized IAP all packaged up. I mail it to those incoming counties. I remind them to download offline map tiles before they get to the command post. And I give them an update QR code and usually a link as well to the map so that they can all load it in and kind of get some situational awareness on the map before they show up at the search. So that's really good. During the search, as I mentioned, filter unused assignments from the map view and move them into a kind of a dummy folder or a leftover folder. And then one other mobile app trick, and I don't know how important this is, but it seems to help. Some people tend to have a lot of apps running and they're jumping back and forth while they're searching sometimes. Best practice, I think, is to force close all the apps that you're not using, and then make sure that CalTopo has a maximum amount of system memory. That's probably getting to be less and less of an issue as each new generation of phone that's coming with AI is forced to increase the RAM in their product. So there's going to be more and more system memory available to CalTopo as time goes by, I think. Finally, map security. This is kind of on by default now, but in the old days, if someone knew your URL, like a press person came in and saw it on a map, they could potentially look at it. By default now, I think everybody, when you create a new map and a team account, it defaults to private. Is that correct, Matt?
Fault is
Private?
a secret.
Oh, defaults to secret, where only the account owners and people with a shareable link can access the map. So there you go. Even if someone knows the URL for it, they, in theory, cannot get to it. So then your only security leak would be a searcher who shares it with the press or someone directly. So there you go. And then if you leave it on URL, anyone that, which is kind of the old day that we did it because we were lazy, anyone with the old maps, five-digit ID, or even it's more digits now, would be able to see it. So don't use that unless you intend to share it as a read-only map for other people to use, like you're doing a public service or something. And same with the public here. And when the search is over, this is something we don't always do really well, but when we're hosting in our own county for sure, one of the things we do as a policy is we'll create a final SARTopo JSON backup archive because someone might delete the map for the search, or it might become inaccessible to others because the team locks it away and law enforcement can't see it anymore, for instance. So I'll save a backup archive file of that. I'll create a final maps with important data and views and visualization. I might, in the old days, sync to Google Earth for 3D visualizations. I can do them in CalTopo now, but you can't really print those easily. So I still will sometimes use either screenshots of CalTopo, or I'll go to Google Earth to my final printing of 3D stuff. Either way, I'll print coordinate tables of all the important things. And we talked about that earlier, but essentially it's one step function where you select all the markers that are important to you. And those might be clue locations or find locations. And then you print this coordinate table and it'll have them all labeled and it'll present them in all the various coordinates. So if it ends up in a court case where they need to go out and revisit the field, they have all that data. And then I'll do a final D4H search report and so forth. And I'll forward that to the search management team, and I'll generally forward it to